everybody. I'm Anne Desjardins, your host for the Silver Lyming. I'm excited to be here, healthy and whole, to bring this podcast to you in an effort, again, to spread some hope and awareness about Lyme and tick-borne illness. Really, what I want people to understand is that healing is possible. It might seem like the deepest, darkest hole you've fallen into and that there's really no way out, but I can prove to you that it is possible, and all of my guests that I've had on can prove it as well. Today's guest is no different. She herself was in a very dark hole for close to 3 decades, which blows my mind. She'll share her story here, obviously, today. But joining us is Heather Sunderland. I'm really grateful to have come across her on Facebook. That's the power of social media. And she is a PSU grad like myself, which I love that. She grew up here in Easton, Pennsylvania, not too far from me. Now she lives out in Arizona, and I am a little jealous for her of that. But she is a functional health coach specializing in regenerative approach healing. And she'll obviously talk a little bit more about this too. But just in the brief interactions I've had with her, I've learned a tremendous amount. And I'm really excited for her to share her story. She has her own company, Health Coaching by Heather. And you can reach out to her on social media and get in touch with her for more information, to learn a little bit more about how she's healed herself. And again, Heather, thank you for joining us. I'm really, again, excited to have you share your story, because it is definitely one of some serious perseverance and inspiration, and just, again, proof that it's possible to heal and figure out really what's going on with ourselves from a root cause standpoint, which is the most important thing. If we didn't get to the root cause of what's going on with people, you're never going to get better. You could do the standard treatment for Lyme, and lo and behold, it's still there because there's other underlying conditions that people need to be aware of. And I think your story will highlight that as well. But again, thank you for joining us. If you don't mind, if you could just share with us a little bit more about yourself and how you became involved with Lyme and tick-borne illness, that'd be great.
Thanks, Anne. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share, and I hope it gives people hope, because that's really my desire. I grew up in Pennsylvania, not really knowing a lot about Lyme and ticks, but had dogs, had ticks on the dogs in bed with us. Never really thought about it. Um, and when I was 30, I started to have daily chronic pain, and I was labeled with chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. Um, Things just over time got worse, severe neuropathy, trouble walking, standing. And by the time I was 35, I had a private practice as a dietitian that I had to close. Sadly, it took until I was 52 to diagnose that I had Lyme. Some doctor said, let's test if you have Lyme because your symptoms are so crazy. Um, so it took a very long time to figure out, that I had Lyme disease. Um, and I did not treat conventionally. I treated holistically with herbs, and went through perksing and die-off. But I was still not well after I treated. I was better, my pain had improved and things were better, but I still wasn't well. And it took me moving to Arizona, because I was still sick and disabled and limited, to discover a lot of the pieces that were missing. Should I go into those
Sure,
pieces now?
please.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Um, a friend reached out when I was in health coaching school and said, Heather, I think you've been exposed to mold. And I'm thinking, what? I live in the desert in Arizona. I'm in a new build. But I remembered we had a water leak in our home in Pennsylvania. And I didn't know anything about mold, right, or water leaks, but we just, wet dried, vacked it up. And thinking back, like all of us had health issues not long after that water leak. And so I went and had blood work done for something called chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And basically, it's just the toxic bucket in the body overflowing and affecting, can affect all the systems of the body. And the blood work showed I had it, and it showed I couldn't detox the mycotoxins from mold, and I couldn't detox Lyme biotoxins. And then all of a sudden, like things were starting to make sense in my health coaching head, that I was toxic, right? And we were so focused on killing Lyme. During COVID, the Lyme came back, and I had Lyme active mono and was diagnosed with Graves' disease, and I was blaming the Lyme on everything. And I know a lot of people do this, like everything we have, ligament laxity, it's the Lyme. And looking back now, it wasn't the Lyme. I was so toxic from mold and other exposures and all the drugs the doctors put me on that my immune system could not do its job to put the Lyme down. And so once I started, um, and my doctor's approaches to detox me and those things just didn't work. And so once I found the regenerative approach, which I specialize in, which is really using food and herbs very deeply, to nourish the body, to alkalize it, to open up detox pathways and detox the body. And I started to detox and made sure my detox pathways were supported. I started, even though I didn't feel good detoxing, detoxing's not fun depending on your age. When you're my age, it wasn't fun to detox, but I saw shifts like right away within days. If you had met me 3.5 years ago, I was down to 10 foods that I could eat. I had SIBO. I had just started to settle down the Graves' disease. Um, and I could barely walk or stand. My vertebrae were going out of alignment if I was standing for more than 2 minutes. And I was at the chiropractor 3 times a week for 8 years straight, and nobody knew why. And when I found out I was toxic, I thought, oh, I think this is why. And 3 months into just doing things to support my body and detoxing, never needed a chiropractor again. So it's been a process of peeling away those layers of toxins and creating an internal environment in my body that viruses, bacteria like Lyme, and other pathogens and parasites can't thrive. Had to do a lot of parasite work because I had undiagnosed Lyme for so long. But now, right, I'm no longer sick. Um, my body's still getting rid of some things on its own, but to me, the most amazing thing is that I created this internal environment that my body has been letting go of viruses, bacteria, and parasites on its own. There are days around the full moon where I'll look in the toilet and there are parasites, and I'm not taking anything. It's
Yeah.
just how I'm eating and the internal environment I've created. And that takes time. It doesn't happen, in a day. But to me, it's just so profound, and that's getting missed out there in the holistic and the traditional community to really be able to use food really, really deeply as medicine. And I don't think I would have believed it. I was a dietitian before being a health coach. I knew food was important, but I really experienced the power of the right nutrition to create that internal environment that things can't thrive.
Yes. And I've got a lot of questions for you, but I'm thinking about specifically if we could backstep for people. We talk about detox all the time. And I'm sure you would probably go into much more detail if somebody were seeing you, but just in a brief moment of time, can you cover for people really like when we say detox pathways, what exactly does that mean, please?
Entail. So we have several pathways that God created our body to be able to get rid of toxins, but we're bombarded by so much, and sometimes those pathways need support. So the skin is our largest organ that toxins are eliminated through our skin. So sauna, sweating, Epsom salt baths help eliminate toxins. The lymphatic system is right under our skin, and it's the sewer system of the body. So when we're sick and we have Lyme, that the lymph is congested in everybody I deal with. And so there's different ways to support the lymph. Sometimes it's herbs, sometimes it's dry brushing or lymph massage. Um, Sometimes it's a vibration plate. Like everybody's sort of different what their body
Uh,
prefers. And I use muscle testing to determine what each person, their body prefers or resonates with. The liver and gallbladder are pathways that need to be supported in our head, process our toxins and if people been exposed to mold. So everybody's different what herbs their body might want to support the liver or gallbladder. Castor oil packs are like really easy, right, to do and inexpensive on the liver or gallbladder. Not wasn't enough for me, but it was part of my journey. And really, the first and most important pathway is the bowels. If you're not pooping, those toxins aren't going to be leaving. And so, making sure that someone's having Ideally, 2 bowel movements a day, one is an okay place to start, but, we gotta get that pathway moving, and the one that a lot of people don't focus on that in the regenerative approach is very much focused on are the kidneys and getting the kidneys, to filter acidic ash, and even teaching people how to check their urine to see if their kidneys are filtering acidic ash well, and supporting the kidneys with herbs if somebody needs it, because you don't need to do every pathway. It depends on the person and how sick they are, what pathways need to be supported. And usually as a coach, I can tell by listening to their symptoms, but I use muscle testing on every client I see to assess each pathway and if support is a priority or highly beneficial, and then picking what they need based on muscle testing. For me, it takes the guesswork out of it, that what I'm giving them it's gonna benefit them.
Yeah. And then thank you for that elaboration on that, because I think that'll help people to understand a little bit better. Because I think a lot of times people have the conception of like, I'm detoxing. And it's like, I know from an Ayurvedic training standpoint, like, okay, cool, but how are you doing it? Are you just moving things around in the body from one place
And
to
it's not
another
leaving, yeah.
and it's not coming out, or you're causing more problems for yourself down the road? Like, so I think we have these like conventional detox kits people can buy at the vitamin shop or something. And like,
Well,
I
detox is you gotta be careful, I think, not to I really encourage people to have somebody guiding them who knows what they're doing or has been through it, 'cause people will say, "Oh, I'm detoxing, I sauna every day," or I'm like, "No, it's not enough." Like, you're helping your body get rid of stuff, but if you genetically I can't detox mold and I can't detox the waste products of Lyme. And we have other toxins in our body from chemicals, pesticides, heavy metals. As those loads come down, our immune system now can do its job and inflammation comes down in the body. So I use nutrition to detox, and I used part of my healing, which was huge, was a regenerative nutrition, a protocol of superfood shakes that were regeneratively farmed. And it was a whole protocol of food that I added in to how I was eating and learned how to eat to alkalize my body. But within a few days of being on that protocol, I started to detox. Um, but also my gut started to heal, and my diet went from like 10 foods to 11 foods to 12 foods. And I'm like, we tried to heal my SIBO. We did all the holistic things, but it made sense because we were bringing down the toxic load. I was detoxing, the nutrition was supporting my liver and my detox pathways. And looking back, I'm like, we were hitting it all. And so my gut was healing, but to just focus on the SIBO and killing the bacteria in my gut didn't work. And to just take binders to detox for me didn't shift anything in my health. I did that for like 6 months and 3 days using regenerative nutrition. It's not uncommon. I had a client yesterday, um, who just I could have cried. She was so sick, and of course, her house had mold and was in a trailer, and got her started on a protocol. And I said, "How are you doing?" I'm always nervous because people are gonna have symptoms, and I can't predict what it's gonna be, and she's my age. She's like, "Heather, I played pickleball." Just thinking, "Are you kidding?" Um, and it's not always gonna be like that. She's gonna have detox symptoms on the journey in all likelihood, but she was feeling amazing. And part of it was the support of her detox pathways, and part of it was she got out of the environment that was making it impossible for her body to detox and move forward. So the environment is often missed in the Lyme world. And that's sort of what I say on my social media page all the time. Like, if you have Lyme, and if your Lyme doctors aren't having you check your environment for mold, um, and they're not addressing detox, like, you should find another practitioner. Because if you're not addressing toxicity and you're not addressing the environment, so many people come to me, and that's why they're not getting all of them who come to me and find me, is because they're in an environment that they're not aware that they're being exposed. And mold, you don't smell it, you don't see it 70% of the time. It's behind a wall, it's under a floorboard. I was in a new build in the desert and we had stachy from building material. a lot of times our building materials and, it's laid out and it's out in the weather and it gets rained on. And in places like Pennsylvania, I was just in Texas, torrential downpour, these homes that were being framed and highly humid out in the open and raining. And I took a video thinking, I feel so sorry for the poor people who are going to move into that home. And a quarter of the population can't detox from mold. And often the people with Lyme who are really sick who aren't getting better, that's part of the issue is they can't detox Lyme and they can't detox molds, mycotoxins. So yeah, it's sad. Every Lyme doctor should be having people test their environment for mold, and none of mine did. None of mine.
And so what you're making me think about, like, well, what if you can't get out of the environment where there's the mold? I, like,
I mean, that happens a lot. I mean, there are things you can do, right? I can't promise that people can get better if they're in mold. It depends on the levels in the house and the types of mold. I healed in my house. We did not leave my house. My levels compared to my clients' levels were in ranges that were acceptable, but nobody likes to see black mold in a house on a test period. And I healed here. So it's all about the level. And I've had people get 50% better in mold, but it's a lot more painful. It's a lot more work, but it really is about how much are they being exposed to. I had this gal yesterday that her scores were through the roof across the board for everything. And she felt like she was dying and all her systems were shutting down. She couldn't poop. Constipation is very common when people are in mold. And yeah, I mean, I was just like, I'm not gonna be able to get you better. You gotta get out of it. And she had a trailer on her property and went into the trailer to live until they figure out how they're gonna address, the house properly. So it's not uncommon that people take time to figure out what to do or and there are things you can do to support your body and to help, right, bring down the load in the environment. Um, but people often don't get better.
yes,
You might be
yes,
like in a holding place,
yes.
um, and it's sad, but and housing that's mold free or low mold, low toxic mold is hard. It's not no mold. There's going to be some mold, toxic mold in every house, but it's like what level can your body handle? I can handle some low levels of toxic mold. I have friends who walk in my house, they react within minutes and it's upsetting. And I'm like, okay, but my body doesn't, and they were exposed at much higher levels than I was. So certain people are much more sensitive. So even people with Lyme can't compare themselves to someone else. You have to know your body and what you can handle. Um, and it's not just mold, it's other toxins as well. Like my brain is very aware when I'm exposed to fragrances or scents or friends who get a new car. I won't even go in the new car
Right.
until until their car's aired out. I'm like, how can you even sit in there? But it never bothered me, years ago when I knew nothing about toxins. So people have to know their own body and what they can handle.
Yeah. Um, that's also making me think about, like, I'm really sensitive now to smells, and I've often thought it's because I've detoxed myself so much that I like I can just sense it a lot better now. Um,
Yeah, your body's alarming you that that's a toxin. Your brain's alarming you. Hey, this isn't good for me. It's very common. I mean, I never reacted to mold in my years of living in mold and not knowing it. My parents told me my childhood bedroom had black mold when they changed out the window and everything clicked. I was asthmatic as a little girl, irritable bowel. Like, no wonder when I got bit by a tick, I got sick. And I didn't know I got bit by a tick. I didn't have a rash, right? I didn't have, and that's very common that people don't have that. But I had tons of ticks on me with dogs and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I lost where I was going with that.
that's okay, but like I've thought about that too, and like maybe people are so toxic that then they get bit because like a lot of times like people we all react differently. It's kind of what you're saying too. It's like different sensitivities for different people to different things. And I do think maybe toxic load I don't think I know toxic load
Huge. It's
lends
huge.
a role to that, right? As to what really goes on with people,
Yeah,
obviously
because
underlying issues, but
I
um,
truly believe, like those of us who get bit by a tick and we get Lyme, it's because other things were going on that our immune system was struggling. For somebody, it may be they have a high stress job. They weren't,
mhm,
they weren't sleeping. They had a really poor schedule, a poor diet, right? It's different for everybody. But part of what I do as a coach that I'm really good at is looking at loads of pathogens like bacteria and viruses and parasites, because everybody I see who's sick, and now everybody has Lyme, but everybody I'm dealing with has mold, and it's a mix of both, Lyme and mold. But everybody has high pathogen loads that I'm
yes,
dealing with. Nobody has low pathogen loads, and that's true across the board with I think any chronic illness. Um, those pathogen loads create acidity in the body and inflammation in the body and damage the gut, and so we get those loads down, the body can do what God created it, to do. And that's my goal, is to get people's bodies working the way God created it to do, and to do what, it's supposed to do. And it's crazy and a cool thing to see. I've had parasites come out in the toilet. I'm not taking any anti-parasitics around the full moon. I'll have gallstones. It's been crazy. Tons of gallstones left with, and I've done gallbladder and liver flushes in the beginning, but they're leaving on their own now without me doing anything. And it's like, wow, this is crazy. So that's my goal, is to create that internal environment, but it can take people some time. It took me a long time because I was so sick for so long, and I'm 44 months out, no longer sick. But there's a few things that are still like choosing to leave my body, and a few things that are I'm needing to support or bridge my body and doing on its own. My hormones haven't come back online on their own. I'm 59, didn't know I had Lyme for 22 years. So there was a lot of dysregulation. And so I'm okay with that. I hope I'm not going to have to stay on the things that I'm taking naturally to support my hormones. But if I have to, I'm okay with that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, because at least there's options. Um,
right.
and I mean, the body is an amazing piece of equipment in that it can recover from so much. And sometimes it just takes time, right? Like time is what we need,
We don't
especially when you're that sick for that long. And so
And we
you
don't
just
want it to take time though. Like we want it. I mean, everybody
clearly,
want we want it yesterday. I mean, I feel
exactly.
bad. I tell people like it's going to take 2 to 3 years, unless they got Lyme, right, and they were sick for a month, right, and they caught it right away. But if you've had it a while, it's not just about killing Lyme. It's about bringing down all those loads in the body, supporting the body, nourishing the body, alkalizing the body, restoring the gut, addressing parasites, and it looks different for everybody, and you can't compare your story with somebody else's story. My story is not going to be your story, but you have to be in it and like ready to want to get better. I had no idea it was possible I could get well. It's crazy saying that. I really didn't know I could get well. But when I discovered the regenerative approach and I saw the shifts that happened, then I knew. Then I knew, okay, I can do this. I didn't know how long it was going to take. And I had friends and coaches who had been very sick, who I was watching them. They were ahead of me on the journey. And my journey looked different than them because they were dealing with mold and SIRS and they didn't have the Lyme piece. And my Lyme piece made my journey look crazier to them. Some of the stuff that I had to go through with all the parasite load and stuff. Um, but I knew without a shadow of a doubt, that I would get there. But you are peeling away an onion, and the body sort of brings to the surface the next thing you need to work out. And every time I thought I was done, it was like, oh, there's something else that my body wants to address.
Yes, which I think will almost always be there. Like
Yeah.
no matter what, the body's support system is always changing. Things that we need to do for it to help it along will always change. And so
I
that's
think the
okay.
hardest part, yeah, I think the hardest part for people that I work with and on my own journey is there's so many symptoms when people are healing. And a lot of people think I'm not healing. Like, oh, my Lyme is back. I'm having nerve pain. And I'm like, and we can muscle test, and it's not it's not like a blood test, but there's just so many symptoms along the way. But when things are leaving the body, they create inflammation. And so my weak area is my back. And so my whole journey, I had a lot of nerve pain every time I detoxed and every time there were parasites dying. And a lot of the parasites were in my spine. But because I could muscle test that it was detox or die off, and then I could muscle test how to support my body, I didn't worry about it. But with a lot of clients, they're like, oh no, this is my Lyme symptom. I'm like, no, your body is letting go of all this stuff that's, you've been exposed to. And that's, I think, the hardest part of the journey. The symptoms are and they're different, right, for everybody. Um, and there isn't a test out there to test. You know, I have clients, they have like, I have a client who her throat will feel tight, the muscles go into spasm anytime she's detoxing or having die off. And there's not a test we can do to verify unless she wants to spend a lot of money on detox kind of tests. And then you're doing it all the time. So the muscle testing was really helpful to just let her know this is your detox symptom. Things are moving out, and we can support, your body and mopping that up and getting it out quicker. Um, but that's the hard part of the journey is the symptoms and how you think about those symptoms. And I have had to say, hey, this is good. Yes, I'm having pain because the stuff is leaving, but it's leaving. Thank you, Lord, that it's leaving. And it's leaving for me now. It's some stuff, and it's not even Lyme related anymore, is leaving on its own. And then just how do I support my body in doing that? Those things are so important, how you think about the process. I have a client who tells me every day she's dying. I'm like, you're not dying. And her toxic loads have come from like a 9 and a 10 to like a 1 and a 2. I'm like, but your body is still getting rid of a ton of stuff, and it's making her feel awful. Um, but I'm trying to get her to retrain and reframe how she thinks about it.
Yeah,
Because the way we think about it, I don't know, you can have so much joy and contentment on the journey if you know God's got you and He's going to carry you through to the other side. The journey's not going to be a straight line. It's going to feel like a roller coaster ride. Um, but enjoy the good days, make the best of the bad days, and enjoy your friends and the connections and the people in your life, within the boundaries of your limitations on the journey. But it is, and nobody is gonna get it. I mean, even some of us other people who've been through it, everybody's journey is so unique. My friends think I'm a little crazy when they hear they've seen what I've been through, but they've seen me go from not walking to hiking. I did 12 miles in Las Vegas, in and out of casinos and stuff like that on our steps. And I was like, 3.5 years ago, I could barely stand, so much is possible for people. But it is going to be a process. I wasn't hiking 12 miles in a month. It
sure.
was
For
very,
sure.
very gradual, my improvement and my walking and my standing and all of that.
That's, I think, one of the hardest parts in the middle is just in being in the middle.
Oh,
Like the
definitely.
getting sick part stinks, but for at least me, it was like a gradual decline. So I didn't notice how high the walls had gotten until I was really at the bottom, and it was like, oh my God, this is a horrible space. And then that middle space of just trying to continually like encourage self or inspire self to keep moving forward and to know that it's going to help. Every little bit helps. Every little bit I can do to fix myself is going to count in the end. And then when you get to the end, it's like, oh, whew, man, but that's the hard part in the middle is just
It is. And
continuing.
even those little mountaintop experiences, I remember because I had such bad ligament laxity, which is really common when people are toxic. I went for a hike, a walk. It's like a third of a mile up this little mountain in the desert, which was like my dream. I was like on high, praising God. And then I needed like 9 visits to the chiropractor from that 1/3 of a mile, little tiny walk. This was before I knew why I was so sick. But I mean, every step of the way, rejoicing in those little shifts that you're seeing. Even if it's a little more energy, or I got out today, but focusing on developing that attitude of gratitude and focusing on the positive. And because the more we focus on what's negative, and if you had met me 3.5 years ago, I was very negative. But it just would spiral me out of control. Because I was stuck inside a lot and couldn't get out. But when I started to focus on the blessings I had, even within those limitations, I just saw so many beautiful things. And then your mind is more open to seeing the blessing in the struggle. And baby quail, walking across in front of my office in the morning. It doesn't have to be big things, but that just shifts how you see your journey. But if you're in that place where everything is negative, and you're whiny and complaining about it, I don't know. I was in that place, and it surely did not help my mental outlook. And it did not. I've had so much joy in the journey now, but in the beginning, I really was whiny and complaining. And I wish I could do that part over. But that's what I encourage people. Just enjoy the process and lean into it. And because it's going to be a bit of a ride.
Yes. Yes. And those are very good words to help people to understand. Like, it's not an overnight transformation as much as we wish
No.
it could be. I've seen instances where it can be. I believe it can be, but I think for the majority of people, it's going to be a pretty long walk back to wellness. But it's possible. And that's really what people need to understand is like, don't give up hope. Don't lose hope. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you've got unanswered health challenges, if you're not sure what's going on with yourself, these are some great areas of opportunity to consider. And if you've been tested for Lyme and tick-borne illness, do know most of the time you're probably only actually getting tested for Lyme. They probably did not necessarily do the co-infection part, which is important to know about. And the standard testing is at best 65% accurate. So it's not anything to hang your hat on. So there are other ways to get more accurate testing to really understand what's going on in the body. And again, if you have things on board like mold exposure or toxicity at ultra high levels, or just different pathogens that are been allowed to run rampant because your immune system is really not functioning any longer, it's just going to make us a little bit of a longer journey probably back to wellness, which is okay. There's people like Heather who are here to help you. And I learned a lot from Heather in just the brief interaction we had right before we're starting to record here. And I really have a great appreciation for a regenerative approach. There is so much we can do for the body naturally through understanding how our body functions, first of all, like who are we as an individual, what's going on with us, and let's figure that part out. And then what does that particular body need from a nutritive standpoint to heal? And again, there's super sleuths like you who have learned different tricks of the trade, going through it yourself, having walked the journey and figuring out how to peel back 22 years and then some probably of too much toxicity or exposure to things that have left us in a less than optimal state of function. And so, you're one of the best people I can think of to help because you've done it. You've lived it and you've experienced it and you know exactly what's happening in people. So I applaud you. And again, you're learning of how to give that gift back to others. Like, it's one thing to do it for self, but then to like turn it and to be able to do it for others is an amazing gift.
It
Um,
was a, I praise God for it. It was the greatest blessing not to focus on me in my journey, but to be able to, because I was coaching while I was healing, which was pretty intense.
eh,
And now it's not that same kind of intense because I'm not sick, but it was the greatest blessing to not be so focused on my symptoms, and to be helping others. It was that silver lining, that
that's
silver,
right. I appreciate you. That's my last question for you. Is just what's the best thing that's happened to you as a result of this? And so,
Yeah,
kind
I
of
never
thinking
in
about
my
that.
wildest dreams would have thought I would have been coaching people through Lyme and mold. In fact, I was a diabetic educator and a dietitian and had a private practice. So I always thought as a health coach, I'm going to do diabetes. And Lyme people and mold are so complicated. I was like, I don't want to deal with that. But I cannot get away from it. No matter what I do, everybody who comes to me is dealing with Lyme or mold, and it's sort of like, okay, God, I get it. This is what I'm supposed to do.
That's right.
Um,
Tap, tap. Tapping on your shoulder, Heather.
so his plan is, better than our plan, and
Always.
yeah, I mean, there's so much you learn on the journey. I know sometimes we don't want to be learning these things, but I do think when we go through a chronic suffering and illness, I am definitely much more mindful now how I spend my time, who I spend it with. Where if you had met me in the heat of illness, I was a people pleaser, right? I just wanted to feel important. And I think I just know myself better as a result of illness and what's important to me and what's not, what God's calling me to do. And what I'm not called to do. And when you're not feeling good too, you have to be more discerning how you use your energy. But sometimes that's a really healthy, almost hedge of protection that God can give us. And we don't look at it that way, but I look back and think it was a hedge, of protection that I had these limitations. We're just focused on, I can't do what I want to do. Um, but I feel like God is calling me to do something different. Part of that is to bring the information about regenerative nutrition and how to alkalize the body and how to create that internal environment that the body can do what it needs to do, but also to educate people about mold in the Lyme community and practitioners who are dealing with clients and they're missing, that's an environmental exposure. We spend so much time in our house and people don't think about it and doctors don't, they're not trained in environmental illness. So it's not, unless they've dealt with it themselves, it doesn't come into people's minds to say, hey, typically let's check this Lyme patient for mold. I went to great Lyme literate medical doctors, sweet, kind, caring. Nobody, nobody said, let's check your body or your home for mold. And when I said I wasn't getting better, they're like, just let's keep treating, let's keep treating. And I'm like, we're missing something.
Yes. Which is pretty wild because I'm getting close to 50 episodes now. And I would say at least 10% of the people I've interviewed have had issues with mold. And I mean, that's 10 or no, let me think about it. 20. I would say 20% of the people that I've interviewed. That's pretty wild to think about that segment of the population just out of something so small of 50 interviews. That many people had mold problems. Like this
Well,
really needs to be something that
25% of the population has the
can,
genetic inability to
that's right.
detox mycotoxins,
Right.
and 25% of the population can't detox Lyme waste products. So if you have Lyme and you can do that blood test. It's a simple blood test. But if you're Lyme and you're not getting better and you're not addressing detox, you got to address detox. I mean, you don't need the blood test, but the blood test may make you feel better to understand why you're so sick and why things aren't moving the needle. But most of the people I see with Lyme who are really sick, they're not detoxing Lyme biotoxins and they're not detoxing mycotoxins, and they didn't know they were in mold. But when you start asking questions about, is there a history of water damage? Anybody else in the family sick? Anybody else have asthma or sinus congestion or allergies? And like, they're like, well, yeah, and like everybody in the family is being affected, but that person is the sickest, maybe because they have the poorest genetics.
Yes.
Um, so
Yes.
yeah, it's so much more common than people realize.
Yes. Well, I do appreciate your time tremendously. This has been very informative and insightful and truly inspirational. Again, just to know that it's possible to be completely bedridden and not have the ability to walk or function properly, think well, to coming out of it and being able to hike 12 miles. Like that's fantastic. And thank you for being living proof and for also supporting your mission from God is what I think of it as is like I feel like I'm on a mission from God and I see that in you and it's very beautiful and I'm just thankful to know that there's people like you who are on this earth. If people wanted to contact you for more information, what would be the best way to do that, please?
Healthcoachingbyheather.com is my website, healthcoachingbyheather@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook. I do a lot on Facebook, but it's my name on Facebook is Heather Sklar Sunderland, and you can friend me. I have a business account on Facebook, but I do not post on there like I do on my personal page. Yeah, and happy to, if somebody needs help, happy to get on a discovery call, see what's going on, and just see if we're a good fit with them. But I appreciate what you're doing. You're spreading hope, letting people know that they can get well and giving them stories of hope to cling to while they're on the journey. Um, so it's wonderful to connect with somebody who has the same heart and mission, and
Thank you.
who's also recovered,
Yes.
and yeah,
Praise be to God. Thank you.
yeah, yeah, it is a huge praise, and I don't think we take it for granted when we've been sick and
No.
we're feeling good. It's just such a beautiful thing.
Yes, it really is a miracle. And I thank God truly every day, each and every minute of every day. Yes.
Yeah, I can totally relate.
Yes. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate you.